Hey there, Internet. This is Pastor Matt Richard, and you are joining us for our next installment of the Church Planting Task Force Google Hangout. And this is a podcast that we do on a monthly basis for the North Dakota District. And we attempt to get different speakers in. And I believe this is our fifth installment of this. And we've had past speakers to come on and talk from such things as church planting to theology and so forth. It's a time for us to kick around ideas as a North Dakota District. So glad you're joining us for this Google Hangout for the next 25 minutes or so. And we are joined this month with Pastor Jonathan Watt, and he is from Iowa, right? Right, Jonathan? It's Creston,
That's correct.
Iowa.
I'm in southern Iowa. Yeah.
Southern Iowa. Okay, so southeast of us here. And I'll tell you what, I've been really excited. I met Pastor Watt at the Small Towns Church Conference in Kansas City. And so we happened to be looking for some lunchtime. And I looked over and I'm like, hey, we got talking. I said, let's go for lunch. And we got talking. And it turns out he was a presenter at the Small Town Church Conference. And he has just a really unique situation and some really neat stuff that I'm really excited for him to share with us. And it is on the subject of congregational mergers. So welcome, Pastor Watt. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, Pastor Richard. I'm excited about this topic. It is something that's worked very well for us here at Trinity. And I really don't know how to do church mergers, but I know about my church and how we merged with another congregation here in Iowa. So
that's great. That's great. And as you presented, it was almost you kind of were presenting as a case study, which I thought was really cool. So it was a case study for us to learn and to kind of pick your brain and what you're doing. So I'll tell you what, I was just fascinated with your presentation, and so I'm excited to get into it. So I have a bunch of questions that I shot over to you. We'll just take us and let these questions lead us, and you just respond, and we'll kind of flesh this out. And if I need to ask any other questions, I'll try to pull all the information out from you. So let's get started here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you serve? How long have you been there? It's always good to have a context. Who are we talking to?
Okay, Trinity Lutheran Church is in Creston, Iowa, and it's in Iowa District West. I've been here 7 years, and a few years ago, we started serving a permanent vacancy down in Mount Ayr, Iowa. It's about 35 miles south. And that's the congregation that we merged with. That was First Lutheran Church. So southern Iowa is a little bit hilly, and it's beautiful country here.
That's great. That's great. And so, yeah, so you're serving up there in Creston, and then serving the other parish at the same time. So here in North Dakota, just a little context for all of us North Dakotans, and just kind of set the context where you're speaking into. Here in North Dakota, most people are familiar with what we would call a 2-point or 3-point church arrangement. And for those that are watching this that are not unaware of that, a 2-point parish agreement is basically a pastor serving two churches. For instance, like here, I'm a 1-point parish. I'm here in Gwinner, North Dakota. But at one point in time, the pastor in Gwinner would serve here in Gwinner and then 10 miles down the road in a church in the city of Sturham. And so that would be a 2-point parish, or a 3-point parish is 3 churches. So that just to have a context there. But however, in your situation, Pastor Watt, you have a congregational merger. So briefly, if you can explain for us, how does a congregational merger differ from a 2-point parish or a 3-point parish agreement? So what would you differentiate the differences between a 2-point, what most people are familiar with, and then what you have done there?
Well, what we've done is we've combined the two congregations into one congregation. So we have one governing body. So we have one budget. We have one voters assembly. We have one board of elders. We have one of each of the serving boards. So instead of having a pastor serving 2 separate congregations, I serve one congregation, and we have 2 locations, 2 preaching stations. We have the smaller preaching station down by the Missouri border, that's 35 miles south, and in Mount Ayr, Iowa. And we have the larger larger preaching station at Creston, and instead of being First Lutheran and Trinity, now we are just Trinity, Creston, and Mount Ayr. So that's really the biggest difference is the governing one governing body to cover the 2 locations.
Right. So instead of having two elder boards and two councils, you have just one governing body that oversees both churches. And you also said something here too, just to flesh this out. You said as far as the name, you had Trinity and First Lutheran, but now it's what? Explain to us a little bit about the name, what the significance of that is.
Well, we had what happened with the members of First Lutheran, which is down in Mount Ayr, is when we actually closed that congregation and transferred the membership of all of those members to the larger congregation Trinity. So, and then all we did was say, now we are not just Trinity in Creston, we're Trinity in Creston and Mount Ayr.
Right, right.
So
So, and I know you've shared the story here, and I think it's fascinating. So let's just kind of if we can just pull the throttle back a little bit and go backwards a little bit and move into the current context. Can you explain a little bit the context? I know you hit it. There was a 2-point kind of parish or a vacancy, if I understood you right, a vacancy arrangement where you were serving down there, and so kind of explain maybe the process, kind of what was going on in the minds of the leaders, yourself, as you moved into this merger. So what were some of the steps that needed to happen? What were some of the challenges? And then as you got into the merger, what were some of the exciting things as far as maybe a relaunch, if you can use that technical words, as you kind of emerged as one church? So if that makes sense, if you can pull back a little bit and walk us into that, that'd be really helpful.
sure. First Lutheran Church in Mount Ayr was a mission plant by the district about almost 20 years ago, and it never did really kind of take off and grow to a great extent. And so once the district quit supporting the full-time pastor, Mount Ayr was not able to support a pastor on their own. So they were in dual parishes with many of the congregations all around them. I kind of say a little bit tongue-in-cheek, they were in a dual parish arrangement or some serving arrangement with every congregation within 100 miles in every direction. It's not really actually that far from the truth. So they had been in what the synod would call a permanent vacancy, and we don't want to have permanent vacancies anymore. But I was serving at that congregation, and my congregation at Trinity at Creston was very gracious to allow me to go down there and serve on Sunday mornings to bring Word and Sacrament ministry. So that's kind of the beginning of it. The folks at Mount Ayr were beginning to kind of lose hope, lose their identity as a congregation. They didn't have a pastor of their own. They were always being served by someone else's pastor, and never able to quite come into an agreement, like a dual parish agreement with congregations, because of the disparity of the situation. So we began, first of all, by reestablishing the idea that if God is present in Word and Sacrament, we have a congregation, no matter how many people are present. The attendance at Mount Ayr went anywhere from single digits to 20, so it's very small. We have now a beautiful building down there. It was well maintained. They spent a lot of time and effort and money keeping the building up. So they had that very strong asset. They were a very dedicated small group of people. They had to be, because they were kind of felt like they were on their own. When I got there, one of the things we started doing right away is having church services just like I was doing at Creston. We did the full liturgy, chanted, and all of that, just to reestablish the idea that indeed, where Word and Sacrament ministry are located, where God is present with His gifts, we have a functioning congregation. They're doing everything that they have to do to be a congregation. So, and that kind of perked them up a little bit, and they began to realize once again that they were. We also used Walther's Church and Ministry as a study to remind them what the church is, what the pastoral office is, and this is very accessible book by both lay people and pastors, and we studied this in some to once again kind of reaffirm the idea that indeed this was a congregation. I told them that they might indeed have to close, and I couldn't promise them that they could stay open. But we would look into some options to try to see where God was leading.
That's great. That's great. And so what I'm hearing, just kind of recap what you're saying, is that with all the vacancies, the church was up and down, left to right. So then when you approached it, you're approaching it as, hey, let's bind us together as one, as a much more formal agreement of pastor and shepherd, and that you're coming alongside and you're merging together is essentially what we're talking about. You're merging together as one wholeness for the sake of word and sacrament. So okay. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say, when we looked at a lot of different options for making sure that we had service in Mount Ayr, pardon me. I'm sorry, Richard.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. So let's talk about this a little bit. As we're looking at both of these churches, what were maybe some of the obstacles? So what we're looking at is that the two would become one, to have one council, to have one elder board, the services, to have divine services in both churches. For you making that agreement, saying, "Hey, I will be your pastor, and I'm serving as a pastor in two locations, with one council, with one name." Was there any resistance, or did people grab a hold of this idea of becoming one? What were obstacles did you find in becoming that one congregation?
Well, we did set some goals, first of all, and I kind of wanted to talk about those because I missed that in the last little segment. But
that's fine.
When we decided to talk about what we wanted in Mount Ayr, we knew we wanted a permanent pastoral presence in the community.
That's a good.
That was one of the things that the Mount Ayr Church didn't have. There was a personal pastoral presence. We wanted that to be very consistent as well, and we wanted to support that location as a Lutheran Lutheran outpost, without the pressure of the numerical or financial growth that they had been experiencing before, and we wanted consistent Sunday morning proclamation of law and gospel in that location. So those were the goals that we were trying to meet as we were trying to find a solution. So what we did was we created a joint committee, and then we had 3 members from each congregation, the presidents of each congregation, the pastors of each congregation, and we began with that group. We did a Bible study, again based on what the church is, and then where is the church, what is the church, what does the church do, what is a pastor, the divine ordinance of church and pastors, how those are created by God, and then we kind of set a timeline for the merger. We set a year out, and we did a lot of very specific things to bring the two congregations together. One of the things we really wanted to avoid was this idea that there was us and them. So we tried very specifically to eliminate that kind of language, that us and them language, from our talk.
I'm going to interrupt there. Expound on that, please, because I think that was really important. When I sat in your session, you were really fixated on that, the us versus them mentality, versus we language. Expound on that a little bit more. That's because that's really valuable, I think, for us to understand here.
Right. Well, when you're talking about these two congregations coming together as one, it's very easy to think that. Well, I'll give you a good example. When we had the communities are very different, and when we were coming together, bringing the money together, there was some money coming in from the Mount Ayr congregation, and as the committee met together to discuss this money, the larger congregation at Creston said, "Well, let's take that money, let's put it in a separate account for maintenance on the property in Mount Ayr, and so that we can take care of their church, so that their church is taken care of. And see, that's us versus them language. The folks at Mount Ayr kind of saw this right away, and they said, no, let's take that money and put it in the general fund, and we will decide together how to spend that money on maintenance for our buildings, not your building versus our building. So that was one of the examples, just one of the examples that kind of helps us to understand this, us and them. Another example was down in Mount Ayr. There's a annual community parade, and when it came time to start, we wanted to have a float in the parade. We wanted to do some events down there, and we had a sign-up sheet at both locations. And the folks at the Creston side noticed that there weren't very many people signed up for the specific congregational things we wanted to do at the Mount Ayr side. And they said, well, this is their community. Why aren't they signing up for more events that we want to do in this community? And then when we began to think about it, we realized that this smaller congregation was already involved in very many of the activities, because the community is so much smaller. They were already involved in very many activities, and so they were serving vocationally already in the community down there. And once the folks at the Creston side realized that, then they quit using the they language, and then they signed up themselves, and so we had many people from Creston go down and serve at the Mount Ayr community event. So it's just that getting rid of that we and they. This is very difficult to do because congregations are not used to serving in two locations, and they're very attached to their own service, and so we did a lot of things to specifically try to melt away that we versus they.
That's great. That's great. That's great stuff. Hey, can we maybe shift here a little bit with the time that we have remaining? Talk about, as far as my understanding is, you had to go through the process of actually getting some lawyers and working on transferring the assets and everything into basically into one church. As far as having all the assets on the same books, the building and so forth, and then talk a little bit about that, and then maybe lead into the almost kind of the relaunching. You had the beginning of the church in Mount Ayr, where you had the new name that came, and it was almost kind of a restart. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure. One thing we found out was that corporations are difficult to close, and a congregation is a corporation, a non-profit corporation registered legally as a legal entity in Iowa, and the congregation at First Lutheran had not renewed their corporation status, and so they went into a status that was inactive. And so we had to get a lawyer to write documents to reactivate the corporation so we could legally transfer the property from the old First Lutheran Church to the new Trinity Church. And then we actually left the corporation, the First Lutheran Church Corporation, open, and we'll be closing it officially here later on. But we had to have the legal entities active in order to be able to actually legally transfer the property from one to the other. And the other thing, of course, we had to do by the Constitution was that we had to get written permission from the district to transfer the property, because the Constitution said if the congregation closes, the district gets the property. And the district was more than happy to make that arrangement, but we had to do that as part of the legal process. Then we made a big deal out of opening the location at the Mount Ayr in Mount Ayr. We got a hold of the newspaper. We got a hold of the business organization. And we had a grand opening, and a lot of people came down. We had a ribbon cutting for the opening of this new location, and it was we got a picture in the paper and all of this. So it was we made a big deal out of opening this new location in at Mount Ayr, wanting to show that this is an active church. So, and that was our goal. That was our first goal. We kind of set out a set of goals over kind of a 5-year plan. Our first couple of years, we've been concentrating on making sure the Mount Ayr community knows that this is an active church. We're not just many people just thought it was a closed church building, and so we worked on that.
That's great. That's great. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off there?
No.
Okay, great. Excellent stuff. I think this is just wonderful. One thing, let's just kind of shift this to you as a pastor, because I know different pastors from our district will watch this. And like I said, I think this is very relevant, extremely relevant, at least here in North Dakota too, with, excuse me, with the number of churches that we have, smaller churches that, this might be a future possibility. How does this impact you as a pastor? I mean, as far as you obviously served in the context of your church in Creston and served as a vacancy pastor, but now as a merger, how does that impact you as a pastor? And how does maybe a typical work week look serving one church with 2 locations?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest advantage is I only have one voters meeting, not for the whole congregation. I don't have to worry about 2 voters meetings. I only have one board of elders meeting a month instead of 2 voters or elders meetings a month. And all the boards and committees are all focused on both locations. So we pulled all the meetings together on one evening, well, except the board of elders. I'll just kind of go through my monthly schedule. The first Wednesday of every month, we have our Board of Elders meeting, and we have 3 elders from Mount Ayr and 4 elders from Creston. We deliberately loaded the elders with a few more from Mount Ayr to kind of give that extra emphasis because of the distance. So that first Wednesday evening, I have a Board of Elders meeting, and we talk about both locations and all the members who are members of one congregation. Then on the second Wednesday of every month, we have all of the board meetings meet at the same time. And we have members from both locations on all of the boards. And they all meet at exactly the same time. And I skip from one meeting to another as is needed to kind of facilitate communication, and they save up the things they need to talk to me about specifically for when I'm in that particular meeting. And then on the third Wednesday, we always have our council meeting, and that's the chairs of all the boards come together. And then if we have a voters meeting, we have voters meeting 4 times a year. That falls on the Sunday after the council meeting. And we do our voters meetings from 2 locations. We have video set up, a video conference, much like we're doing here. So the members can attend at both locations. We did have to change our constitution to allow only voters meetings from the 2 fellowship halls, not one person deciding to Skype in from home. So we do that. I go down to Mount Ayr for office hours 2 afternoons a month. The first Tuesday of every month. I'm there at noon, and then I stay until 9 o'clock in the evening. We have on Tuesday evening, we have what we call the Mount Ayr Community Committee, and that is the members who live in that area get together and we talk about things that the whole congregation needs to know about what's going on in the Mount Ayr community. We decided to do that because having that much smaller community and that distance of 35 miles, it's much more difficult for the congregation as a whole to know what's going on down there. And so they have that meeting, they communicate it to the boards that meet the next Wednesday and the council that meets the following week. And so we discuss all of those issues. And then on the third Tuesday, I'm down there again, and we have in the evening, instead of the meeting, we have Bible study. Uh, so so that's kind of what my monthly schedule looks like. We have church every Sunday in both locations. I go down to Mount Air at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. We wanted that very consistent Sunday morning worship. It's always at 8 o'clock. We don't cancel it for any reason. Even if there's a big event going on at the Creston location, we still have that 8 o'clock church service down at Mount Air. We wanted that to be there every Sunday. And then at 9:45 we have church at the Creston location. So that's what the typical month looks like.
One thing that you're sharing here, I'm just kind of thinking in the back of my mind. I served. It's been a little about 4 or 5 months ago. I served a vacancy for about a year, and I have found wonderful people down in the city of Oaks, just down the street, about 25 miles down the road. But one of the challenges I found for myself, in the vacancy was I felt like my mind was always going two different ways. It was going Gwinner and it was going Oaks, and I was going. I felt this tension be going like this. But as you're talking here, I'm thinking to myself, man, with this congregational merger type context, your mind is not being divided. I mean, it might be to a certain extent because you have two different locations, but just the way you're talking, one congregation, one elder board, one council for all the members in that just so happen to be in two different locations. And so do you agree with that? I mean, in a sense, maybe your mind is not going this way as a pastor, but you're more so looking at the whole together. Maybe expound on that if you agree, disagree.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And maybe another way to think about it too is that the whole congregation is thinking about the two locations, not just me. So it's not me divided between the two locations. It's the whole congregation is spread over two locations, and so all of the boards we always talk about. What, like the mission board, what mission projects are we going to do specifically in Mount Air, and what projects are we going to do specifically in Creston, and what mission projects are we going to do that involve our whole congregation. So it's not just me that's like in dual parish, it would be just more or less me that was divided between the two. Now the whole congregation looks at both communities, and we consider Mount Air to be our first concentric circle. Jesus talked about being witnesses in your local area and the farther area. Well, Mount Air is our closest mission activity, and we have people on the ground in Mount Air that help us to do that mission. So it's the conversation of every meeting. How are we going to serve both communities, rather than just me trying to figure out how I'm going to serve as a pastor, going to serve two communities. It's the whole church serving both communities.
That's great. It's great. Absolutely awesome. I love it. I think it's great. That's great. Well, we are about at the end of our time here, so I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know you had a chapel service before and a chapel service a little later on here and some other activities, so thank you so much for taking 20 to 30 minutes here to share this with us. We're going to be posting this on our website for the church planting. It's churchplantinginnorthdakota.org. So we'll post this video there, and we'll get dispersed throughout the North Dakota district and beyond. So it's just wonderful. It's great to meet you. Great to pick your brain and to hear your case study there in Iowa, Pastor Watts. So just thank you so much for taking time today to be with us through this Google Hangout.
Well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure. And anyone who wants to talk to me about this individually, I'm sure you'll be able to give them my contact information.
Yep,
and
that's
I'd
great.
be glad to talk to anybody about it.
Great. And I know you're on Facebook too, so we can search you. They can seek you out there too on Facebook, so that's great. Well, we're going to be concluding this segment here. Just to keep in mind for the church planting and revitalization of congregations here in the North Dakota District, we do have that website, which is www.churchplantinginnorthdakota.org, and we have a segment on there from last month with Pastor Heidi with the church planting endeavors over in the Wofford City area in the western North Dakota in the midst of the Bakken oil boom over there. We also have some videos on there in regard to Pastor Donovan Riley talking about preaching to the bound will, and we'll continue to do these here. And I have a list on my board of different people I want to get in contact with as far as different things to disperse and to interview and pick their brain and share with you. So at this time, we'll be signing off. Thank you for joining us, and again, thank you to Pastor Watt. Lord bless you over in Iowa, and the Lord bless you, the watcher, as we continue with the church planting here in North Dakota and the revitalization of churches in North Dakota as well. The Lord be with you. Amen.